Hey, welcome to the Upbeat Hang. My name is Duke.
Cabo?
Amy.
And we are
The
Upbeat Hang. We are discoordinated.
I think we're doing the Brady Bunch thing there, Duke. Mm-hmm. I think you were going to say upbeat and Amy was going to say hang, and we all do a cheer. So, Duke, what are we talking about today, pal?
We're doing a cheer for 50 years. 50 years later, 1971, the albums that came out in 1971. Some of those albums are still to this day considered masterpieces. Others did not, stand the test of time as well. But in my opinion, I think things like the album like What's Going On by Marvin Gaye and Just As I Am by Bill Withers are two of the best albums that came out, and to this day are some of the best albums out there. There's my point. You got one? Let me hear it.
Aim?
I think that I agree with you. I think that those two are very great albums. And I have a significant age difference between you and me, and I feel that they're timeless.
Yeah, we
How about
definitely
you, Ken?
picked some timeless records. Yeah, we definitely picked some timeless records. So when I get to my two, I think I have a point about that. But
Amy,
Duke, which two albums are you going to do for us?
What's Going On and Just As I Am. What's
Okay.
Going On by Marvin Gaye and Just As I Am by Bill Withers.
I'm sorry. I thought you said to me, what's going on?
And you said, I don't know. It's Just
That's
As
right.
I Am.
I said just as I am.
I think I think What's Going On was clearly Marvin's biggest album of all time. And despite the fact that he was pretty much a mess at that point in his life, in his personal life, the album is just a masterpiece. And it was such a departure from the black pop that he had been known for previous to that. And it just rocked the world. And to this day, that album is it's a masterpiece. That and I love the effect that Bill Withers had on music, because he was a very simplistic singer-songwriter, like folk guy. And Booker T produced the album, and the band played on it, and it just stayed what Bill is, but with the amazing talent of Booker T's band. So to me, those two are just unbelievable masterpieces. What about you, Amy?
Okay, so I chose two very different styles. One was Carole King, Tapestry, and the other one is The Who's Who's Next. So I'm a singer, and I am a very big fan of Carole King. I think that her songwriting is like second to none. She started out as a songwriter. She wrote something like 400 songs for different people, and all of us here, as well as listening, are familiar with most of her songs, even though she's not the actual singer on it. Where on Tapestry, she was the singer. So her real true love was actually always just songwriting. And the fact that she took it to the next step and wound up singing her own songs was just incredible. There is not one song on this album that I don't love, and I sing the majority of them, actually. So, and I also just like Carole King as a person. She's just she's humble. She once said that the greatest compliment that anybody could ever give her was that she's down to earth, rather than, up there in the clouds. And then for The Who's Next, that's another just timeless album, especially that Baba O'Reilly, which is played at weddings all the time, and everybody goes crazy over that song, which they know it as Teenage Wasteland, of course. But what I like about it is the reason that it was written had nothing to do with what people think. That the teenagers think that it was written for them, how they get wasted, drunk on drugs, but it was actually about just the mess that they left behind, for example, at Woodstock. It wasn't that they were wasted, but the mess, the trash that they left all over the place. So I found that interesting. And
It was
Behind
about
Blue
Woodstock?
that was one of the places that they discussed that
Okay.
they had written it about. Actually, I should say, had written it about Pete Townsend about that, as well as just generally how teenagers are just a wreck, just messy, slobby. They just kind of dump their trash wherever they are. But it wasn't about being wasted, if that makes any sense. And then Behind Blue Eyes, I just, that's another one that I think is just incredible. And it was redone by Limp Bizkit in 2000. I have to look this one. 2003. And you wouldn't expect Limp Bizkit to redo a Who song, but it was really, really well done. I want to just go back real quickly to Baba O'Reilly. That was, the name of it wasn't something interesting too. It was his two musical professors. It was Baba and Riley. So I thought that was really interesting too.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. And everybody who ever watched television would remember it from CSI New York. That was their theme song. So, but the biggest thing that I liked about this album was the vision that they had when they were writing it. It was about not just making music, but making more than just an album. It was on movies, on soundtracks, it's on trailers for movies, even going back to as recent as 2020. So I thought that was really interesting. And there you go. That means it's timeless if they're still using those tunes.
Definitely is.
Now, what do you guys think about my choices?
I love them personally. I think The Who, I mean, come on. The Who is almost anything they did was classic. And it's just amazing. 50 years later, it's still classic.
Yeah.
And Carole King speaks for, excuse me, Duke, speaks for itself. The name speaks for itself. The name precedes itself. Kind of like Duke's.
How about you, Ken? What albums did you pick?
Well, let me put it this way, folks, and I'll make this as quick as I can. I always thought one of the most interesting quotes I ever heard in the music business was from Mick Fleetwood, because people asked him when Rumors came out, they said, what are you going to do next? And he said, well, understand that your first album takes 18 years to make, and your second one makes a year to make. So there's always a lot of pressure with the second. I picked Master, not Masters, Master of Reality by Black Sabbath, which came out in July of 71. And I also picked L.A. Woman, which was the sixth album from The Doors that actually came out in April of 71. So I'm really close. But I want to give you some stats, because you can go with critics and they have their opinion, but I want to hear what the people's had to say. And this is what's interesting. Let's take Black Sabbath for a second. And Amy, I want to throw this out to you, because you talk about creating material. Black Sabbath debuted with their first album in 70. And in the same year, they came out with Paranoid, which sold at that time 10 million copies, which was pretty good. After that, 10 months later, they come out with Master of Reality, which is the album that I'm reviewing. And the combination, I'm going to bootstrap Paranoid a little bit here. The combination of Paranoid and Master of Reality has been linked by most critics, to borrow from them for a second, to the origination of heavy metal. So it had a very, very significant impact on music, because that's where many people felt the heavy metal, the grunge metal really started. But what I found fascinating is if you look at Paranoid, you had that album, again, and even though I'm focused on Master of Reality, you had Paranoid, War Pigs, Iron Man, Fairies Wear Boots, some of the greatest Sabbath classics. And 10 months later, you come out with Master of Reality. See, I just did it, which had Sweet Leaf, Children of the Grave. And if you're a Black Sabbath fan, it's amazing. You put out these classics 10 months apart. It wound up being Master of Reality, wound up being their third best-selling album. So I really enjoyed that, or at least I can really appreciate the greatness 50 years later, because people are not doing that today. They're not putting out, most artists are not putting out 2 albums a year, and they're also not putting out albums 10 months apart. Now, I want to flip over to The Doors. I was a little surprised, because my favorite Doors song personally is L.A. Woman. This album, as I said, was released in April of 71, so we're really close, almost to the day. This was their second best-selling album. It sold 10 million units. The only one that outsold it was their original album from 67 at 14 million units. So what I found interesting about, again, The Doors, and kind of combine that with Black Sabbath, is that the Doors in 67 put out 2 albums. They put out The Doors and Strange Days. In 68, they put out Waiting for the Sun. 69, The Soft Parade. All great albums. Morrison Hotel. And then they come back and hit with L.A. Woman. Now, L.A. Woman, as everyone know, Light My Fire was the biggest selling single by the Doors. However, Riders on the Storm, which is on L.A. Woman, was their second best single. So I think what I took out of both of these albums is that the consistency back then was incredible. And I think they're iconic because in the Black Sabbath realm, they almost were the precursor to a whole new genre of music. For the Doors, they were just doing their blues and they were classic and they were very, very consistent. Now, I will say this much. I was surprised, and I want to ask you guys, I was surprised because what do you think the number 1 selling single from L.A. Woman was? Even though it's titled after a song, what do you think the number 1 selling single from L.A. Woman was?
So it wasn't L.A. Woman.
It was not. No, it was not L.A. Woman. It was actually Riders on the Storm that sold 1.1 million copies, and L.A. Woman did half. I would have thought it would have been the reverse.
Wow.
And like I said, only Light My Fire outsold that. So I think for all those reasons, I was fascinated that 50 years later we can look back and we can see how consistent and how they were just churning material and not crap. They were putting out classic stuff. And to this day, I mean, any kid playing heavy metal is going to know a Black Sabbath song. And to this day, I can name some, Amy and Duke, I know you know some local bands. You're going to hear plenty of Doors.
Oh, yeah.
So it's timeless. The effects are there. And I just thought that it was amazing when I really thought about the chronology of how the consistent sales back then and how they put this material out. I think 50 years later, I think they're greater than when they first came out. I don't think we realized at that time how great they were going to be.
I tend to think the impact that, and this is in contrast to what you're saying, I tend to think that the impact that L.A. Woman had in terms of ripple effect, what it caused, is less than the albums that I chose or the albums that Amy chose. I think those were more impactful. I think I could be wrong, but that's my opinion. What do you?
Yeah, I understand.
What say you?
I think that's opinion. What say you? The Doors didn't put that album out. I think I'm gonna put that album out. What say you? I don't know because again, that's why I wanted to stay away from what critics said, or because everyone can have an opinion. Some people have told me the Doors are the best. The Doors are the best group of all time. Some people hate them, so that's why I wanted to look at the numbers and see really where the numbers were. But I think that as much as I think that I think Black Sabbath, their uniqueness is pretty clear in the heavy metal realm. The Doors really just, to me, were almost on a standalone island. So I don't know. It's hard to say. In my opinion, they were very impactful. I think just as much as the albums you guys chose. But again, that's opinion. So anyone's opinion counts, and everyone's entitled to theirs.
Well, it's interesting, Ken, because before we actually spoke about who we were each choosing, I chose the Doors also. So when you had texted that you were choosing the Doors, I said, okay, I'll choose something different. It's because that's what I grew up listening to with my parents. So I was very familiar with everything. And I would have taken a completely different angle on the discussion if I had spoken about the Doors. So I find it really interesting what you're saying. I think it's great.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool, Ann.
Yeah.
And Duke, the other thing I think that, not that the Doors were the sole proprietors of this idea, so to speak, but they kind of started, I think, with Morrison Hotel and L.A. Woman, those albums. They started that kind of California. They were part of that California movement. Now, of course, there were other bands, the Eagles and the Beach Boys and so forth, that also brought a different mentality. But I think L.A. Woman, at least in a lot of people, identify Los Angeles with the Doors, like solely Los Angeles. That's what they identify. So I don't know. It's interesting. All I could say is I think that for all the albums we've all chosen, I think we can possibly agree. At least this is my opinion. People are not putting out this type of quality material in this type of time period as they have before. Because Amy, you mentioned the Who. The Who are very, very consistent.
Very.
There's no clunkers in there whatsoever. And the albums Duke picked the same with these artists. That's why they're classic, because they were just consistent. And instead of putting out one single here and being one hit wonder, they just kept putting it out and out and out, and that is so hard to do.
Very hard to do. That's why I love Carole King so much, because she had such, a knack for writing. Even though a lot of her lyrics were not done by her, they were done by her partner, who was, her ex-husband. But she just had such a knack about the melodies, and just amazing. So Tapestry was just a conglomeration of so many things that she had written in the past, and we're all familiar with it.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? You mentioned Carole King. Carole King, I think, like you said, had this quality that you almost thought you knew her. She seemed like such a nice person, even if you don't know her. There was almost a connection you had with her, almost like a kind of Karen Carpenter connection, so to speak. That a lot of people like Karen Carpenter if they didn't like her music because they felt they knew her.
Right, like I want to know her. I want to know her.
Exactly, like a lot of the way people look at me. They're like, I think I know him from America's Most Wanted or something like that, I guess. I don't know.
We're going to get reamed out because we didn't pick Imagine by John Lennon, and we didn't pick, Madman Across the Water by Elton John. But,
Well, so let's talk about that, what you just said, John Lennon, Imagine. So I thought about choosing that one. And unless you're a huge, huge John Lennon fan, Imagine is really one of the only very, very, very well-known songs on that album that everybody knows.
Right. And, of course, we're going to get reamed out because Led Zeppelin's fourth album came out in 1971, which has Black Dog and When the Levee Breaks and Going to California and Stairway to Heaven.
That opens it up, though, for us. That's great, Duke. That's a great idea. So if anybody wants us to discuss a specific topic, please let us know in the comments, and we will do it, right?
You know why? The reason I did not choose Zeppelin 4 as my choice? Because you're not allowed to play one of the songs in the music store. I don't know if that's saying something good or not, but I don't know. I felt limited, like, I can't talk about that one.
What, was it just foul language? What was the reason for it?
Oh, because every person who learns to play guitar plays that ding, 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 ding.
Gotcha.
Aw.
That one is Smoke on the Water.
There's so many.
Right.
Smoke on the Water. There you go.
But that's not 71.
No. But listen, Paranoid is another one of those songs. Excuse me, Amy. Paranoid is one of those songs that every guitar player learns how to play too.
Yeah.
At least they used to learn.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, listen, the answer to your question, Duke, is that this podcast would not be 30 minutes. It'd be 30 years if we went over every album from 70 or 71 or from that range that were just iconic. I think the flavor that I got from my two, from Duke, from your two, and Amy from your two, is that it just was a different, for the music business, just a different industry, a different time.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Very, very.
Until you hear my album, of course, folks. But that's another. we'll do that some other time.
So leave in the
notes.
notes.
That one won't clear the party out. I don't know what will.
Leave us your comments in the comments. What your top choice for top album from 50 years ago would be. That would be 1971. We'd love to hear what you have to say.